Hello everybody, it's Jay Roby. I'm going to be starting a video series on the Ruy Lopez. The Ruy Lopez was created in 1561 by the priest of the same name, and it's one of the most requested videos that I get from my subscribers to make. And it would be impossible for me to create one single Ruy Lopez video that goes over all of the possibilities and variations. So what I've decided to do is break them down into smaller videos, with each video having a Grandmaster match highlighting the specifics of the strategy. And this video is going to focus on the classical defense. Now the Ruy Lopez, if you're not familiar with it, basically goes as follows. The white plays e4 and black replies pawn to e5. White then plays knight to f3 and black will play knight to c6, and then white plays bishop to b5. And this is the Ruy Lopez, otherwise known as the Spanish opening. Now the Ruy Lopez in general, if you don't factor in the variations, scores a 41% win percentage for white, 26% win for black, and about a 32% draw. So that's probably one of the reasons why it's one of the most popular white openings out there. And there's a number of grandmasters that have made excellent use of it, including Bobby Fischer. But today's video we're going to focus on the classical defense. And the classical defense, otherwise known as the Cardell defense, is when black will play bishop to c5. So as a white player, what are your best options when black plays this? Well, the defense itself has the ECO code for the classical defense is C64. So if you want to take a look at it on the online databases, you're definitely more than welcome. But the defense scores a 42% win for white, 27% win for black, and a 31% draw. And it's one of the oldest defense to the Ruy Lopez. Now, looking at those statistics on the surface, it might seem that white has a really good opportunity to win. But you have to remember, from black's side of the board, if you take both the 27% win and you add the 31% draw, it's a good defense. If you can draw a game as black, there's definitely nothing wrong with that. So when black plays the bishop now to c5 and the classical defense is reached, there's a couple options now for white. White's most popular reply in this position, and one of the most stable, is pawn to c3. And now black's got a couple decisions. A couple things can be played by black here. The first is pawn to f5, and this gets into the Cardell gambit. A warning for black players, from the research that I've done, it leads to fairly messy positional play, so you want to keep that in mind. And there's also a sharp drop in draw percentages, simply because the position will get a little wild and it might get a little out of control. And as a black player, if you're comfortable with that, that's great. If you're not comfortable with that, then you definitely want to avoid the Cardell gambit. So a more solid strategy for black after pawn to c3 is simply knight to f6. Now, knight to f6 is usually followed by a castle from both players. So white will castle and black will castle. And then afterwards, white will usually play pawn to d4, and black can respond bishop to b6 and have a good chance to have a good game. And this variation is called the Benelot variation. Now if we go back to this position here, just before white plays pawn to c3, there's also another move that is very popular for white and very solid as well. And that's simply, instead of playing c3 at this point, it's simply to castle. And from this position, you can still get into your c3, d4 lines, or respond to black accordingly how black plays. The basic general gist, though, that I'm trying to get across is that as a white player, when you see someone play the classical defense, when they play their bishop out to c5, you have two strong moves that you can use. The first, like we covered, is pawn to c3. The second is simply to castle. And those lines will give you very solid play from white. So let's get into a Grandmaster game and see how the pros do it. Now the master game I've decided to use for this video is the match between Emanuel Lasker and Wilhelm Steinitz. It took place in 1896. It was a World Chess Championship rematch, and Lasker is one of the strongest Grandmaster level players from the white perspective of the board against the classical defense. So Steinitz here plays bishop to c5, so gets into the classical defense line, and now Lasker plays pawn to c3, and if you remember back, this was one of the two good solid moves from white. Now black plays knight to e7. Now we did talk about how f6 was a good viable option for black, but Steinitz decided to go knight to e7 here. And what Lasker did is he took the opportunity to castle. Black then developed knight to g6. And white now makes the push with the pawn to d4, which usually follows the c3 pawn placement. He just basically changed the move order around a little bit. So instead of going for an immediate d4, he took the opportunity to castle. And then after black developed knight to g6, he made the pawn push to d4. So black captures the pawn, white recaptures, and now black places its bishop on b6, which is where it goes in the classical defense. However, this knight is still in a different position. And you'll notice a couple things from white in this position right off the bat. First of all, white still has two center pawns remaining and black is down to one. And the center position of white is a little bit better than black simply because of the piece placement. For example, this bishop here can access a4 if required, or anywhere along this diagonal, and it still has the option to take back this knight. So it's you can see here that Lasker is building up a good strong presence, and I think part of the reason that he's able to do this so fluidly is simply because of Steinitz's decision to go with the knight to e7 as opposed to f6. So the game continues. White now develops knight to c3, and now you'll see that the center position is just improving for Lasker. Black castles, and white plays pawn to a4. Black plays pawn to a6, and now white brings the bishop to c4 along this diagonal, attacking this pawn, which isn't really a big threat at the moment for black, simply because the king and the rook are both protecting this pawn. But white is preparing for a movement by black to get some activity going on the queen side, because you can see from white's pieces in the center, it's going to be difficult to come in on the king side, but the pieces for black on the queen side are much more better placed for a queen side initiative. So Lasker was actually pre-planning that, and he knew it was going to come, especially after the pawn to a6, kicking the bishop out. So we're going to see some piece movements here by black to try to accomplish that. So from here, black plays pawn to h6, preventing the bishop from coming to g5, and white plays pawn to h3, securing the g4 square. Now when black plays pawn to d6, you'll notice here that even though the access is opened up for the black bishop, 3 of these possible 4 squares are taken away. So unless there's an exchange variation that Steinitz is looking at, this bishop is still not really accomplishing very much. So from here, black plays knight to e7, white activates the rook to e1, and black plays pawn to c6, preparing for a push to b5. White plays queen to b3, black plays bishop to c7. White places the knight on d2, and now black is adding the rook onto the onslaught here on the queen side. White activates the rook to c1, and if you take a quick look at the rooks here, white's rooks are doing more for the match currently than black's. The b8 rook for black is going to be playing an important role, but f8 is still basically in its castle position. So from here, Steinitz plays pawn to b5, white captures, black captures, and now white moves bishop to d3. Black plays king to h8, and now white develops knight to e2. And you can just see the beauty of the central position here. Like, I mean, white's pieces are so active, and unfortunately due to YouTube time limits, I'm not going to be able to go through the whole match here, but I'll just flip through the remainder of the moves here as white really capitalizes on this. So as you can see here, white's just using its pieces, getting material a little bit off the board. Steinitz offers a queen trade here, and Lasker accepts. And from here, white's pieces are directed to either side of the board, whichever white requires, and the match just continues. And as you can see here, Steinitz is trying to get his king into a better position to make use of these pieces on the queen side, but Lasker just continues developing his pieces, using them properly. And if we stop here, you'll notice that black has 4 pieces on its home rank and only 1 piece outside of the home rank. So really, Lasker was just able to use his superior central position to secure the win, and at this point here, Steinitz resigns, because after check with rook, king takes, checkmate. So it's a good defense, and I know that Lasker's a very strong player as white, and in fact he's one of the best grandmasters at playing against his defense. But I think this match just really shows that if black goes wrong in the defense, it's going to be a very hard play at getting a win or even a draw. So you have to be careful as black. It can slip easily into the loss category. So take care. I hope you enjoy the video, and we'll see you next time.